So I'm going to give just a few more moments, folks, and then we'll be starting. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for your patience and for hanging out for a moment or two while we get started. So, I am going to be recording and this will be sent along. But today, the topic du jour is AI everywhere. And so, what I really want to focus on today is the conversation I'm hearing all over, which is what do I need to do with this? And this is coming from a place of actual concern, not just what's this new fad I need to keep up with. But as we enter this new world of, well, we'll say it's new in some cases, of AI, as business people, we really want to know where should we put our time and energy. So let's get going. I'm going to start with a little poll just to begin with. And in this poll, what I'd like you to do is just answer. You can put this in the comments if you like. So I have them open. But you can also use, you know, you can use chat. So here's your options. What is your organization currently using for AI tools? So are you using something official that most employees are actually using? Or do you have a mix? Maybe personal, maybe official apps. Is it mostly personal? Are folks using their own versions of ChatGPT or Claude or Perplexity, whatever it might be? Are you still looking? Or is your response, what's AI? Oh, I see. Great. We've got a C. And that's probably, thank you so much for sharing there, Amy. That's most likely what we're seeing in a lot of organizations right now. A lot of mixed use, kind of just winging it, right? So don't feel that you are in Abs and Company. We're all in this together. So let's take a look at what we're seeing actually. Let's go forward. So here's the context. This is a some data that was released by IBM. They did a reality check, and this is Canadian data, by the way. 79% of office workers are using AI in the workplace, and only 25% of that is an enterprise grade solution. So think about the numbers there. We are all diving into this space, and for good reason. There's a lot of really interesting applications and use cases, things to do. But guess what? We've got a gap, and that's really what today's challenge is all about. So let's take a look. There we go. Um, the reality, and it's a sober one here. 95%. Now, this number's been, I've been at a lot of conferences lately, and what I can tell you is that this number has been thrown around quite a bit, but from the MIT Media Lab, they have said that 95% of our AI investments are producing zero measurable returns. Think of the money that we're spending. That's one side of it, but also think of the time, think of the energy, all of those things that we are investing into this space and not getting any return. So we are also getting pretty frustrated. Um, as we think about this, just 1 second here, my buttons are not clicking. There we go. This is what we're seeing. I call it pilot purgatory. So, this is the combination of what I'm seeing in the project space or just in general. They range from let's just throw spaghetti at the wall, let's see what works. Let's also let our employees figure it out. That's a common one, and especially in workplaces where there's a lot of younger folks, where we make an assumption that they have the skill sets in order to be able to do something meaningful. We'll build our own. That's really popular in in-house tech teams. We'll just do it ourselves. And then there's it's just a fancy tool. It's another fad, something of that nature. The challenge with all of these is that it kind of leads us to believe we can just sit back and maybe just let it pass. But the reality is we can't because the cost of waiting is pretty high. So if we think about talent, we know from data that 46% of workers will leave for an organization that has an AI plan or that's doing something meaningful. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're creating new products and services, but it means that they're understanding the landscape, and it gives people a little more certainty about their role if they understand how an organization is going to use these tools. The switching costs as well. So this is an interesting one when we look at stickiness for relationships, business relationships. And there's some data that reflect that AI relationships, and what they mean is organizations that are using it in a meaningful way can lock in those relationships a little longer. And I would say that this would be things like follow-up and reminders, or being able to automate some of the challenging costs of vendor management, for example. Another one, and this is one that keeps me up at night, has a lot to do with what we call data exposure. So, where is your data going? Are all of those employees that are using their tools exposing your personal data or the company data for that matter? So, what we call shadow AI, or those toolings that we don't really know folks are using, that can add over 300,000, 108,000, I guess, $1,000 per data breach. I'm assuming that's US dollars, by the way. And lastly, we have a competition gap where success will, the people who get out first, the early birds, they don't just get the worms, but they often define for a while how that's going, how the competition is going to lead. So we have fear, and we have also fear of doing nothing. So, what about that 5%? So these are the people that are doing something. And here's the thing, they don't have better tech. They don't have bigger budgets necessarily. And they don't necessarily have smarter people. But what they do have is organizational readiness. So now I'm also going to share that this is not just unique to AI projects. I would suggest that AI, like many transformations, is a major business shift. And like anything, you get through it by being organizationally ready. So I'm going to use today a framework. Now you can find this online, and it's actually a great way to pull together the key parts of thinking through how to bring in AI in your workplace and how to work with it. So this is Microsoft's 5 drivers of AI readiness. And very, very briefly, they cover off business strategy. And so that's all about how your AI, how AI is going to support your business goals. Also, do you have a tech and data strategy in addition to that? Now, these first two are the ones that normally when I'm talking to clients, most people have thought about these two. Yeah, we have a business strategy. We want AI to perhaps help us with customer acquisition. We have a data and a tech strategy. Yeah, we want to run it in our, alongside of our existing technologies. The next three are where we start to see less attention. One is, do we actually have the expertise, and do we have repeatable processes that can help us create value with AI? Do we have the organization and culture? And I'm going to argue this is probably the most important one, and it's kind of funny it's fourth. But do we have a leadership vision? Do we know what skills we have on our team? And do we actually have the culture that's ready to take on this challenge? And also the last one, which again, sometimes gets I'll call the short shrift when we look at planning is the AI governance. And that's really about the structures like data privacy, responsible use, security, accountability, the processes. It's the container that help us to use it responsibly. So within that framework of five, let's just dive in and take a look at some examples. Now, I've placed, and this is definitely how Rockstar looks at the world. Organization and culture is really the most important. Without people, as much as this is, talking about technology, nothing really gets done. And also, if it's going to trip up, we all know this. Generally speaking, it's going to be the people. So if we look at this first example, DTEC, they are an energy company. And all three companies here represented, used AI for culture in order to either improve customer culture or internal. So in DTEC's case, they really wanted to get better at their customer service. So they used AI with their team to reduce huge numbers of inquiries. And they reduced the time it took per inquiry from 4.5 to 3.5 minutes, so a full minute. And when you looked at the volume of responses, a lot of it was just figuring out what was repeatable. What's interesting is they didn't get rid of their people. They used it as an augmentation rather than an automation in many cases, which we'll see can be the key in many cases to onboarding. The second example is Suzuki. And so this organization, and you're probably all familiar with Suzuki vehicles and motorcycles, they wanted to use it internally. So they looked at how they could use AI to integrate across the various business functions that they had. And so they picked five key areas where they could see how they could integrate together. And they also had it, and this is really important, top-down led, so that every single person within the organization knew how their role would be, impacted by the integration. So those were really strong and successful approaches. Now, the third one, not so successful, which was Meta. So Meta, of course, had their reality lab, and over time, because of the fact they kind of just threw people into it, and they had a general goal, but they didn't really have good alignment of how they were going to use AI in order to, uh, bring forward these innovations that they'd been planning. And what ended up happening is not much innovation. They ended up laying off over 22,000 employees. They lost $47.5 billion over 3 years, and they haven't really seen much for their investment. So a lot of that really had to do with how the culture supported or didn't that particular vision. All right, let's move along to the next. And by the way, feel free if you want to pop a question up at any time as I'm rolling along here, although quick 30 minutes. So the next piece is really about the business strategy, as we've talked about earlier. And in this case, AI supporting how your business goals come alive is really the key. Sometimes we get so caught up in the tech of itself, we forget that we're using it for a purpose. So some successful examples here, we had Rolls-Royce. They used AI to really narrow in on a big problem, which was unplanned maintenance events. And so through pattern recognition and also using key events along the way, they were able to identify and prevent over 400 unplanned maintenance events. And that, equated to millions in dollars of savings in a year. So a really good example of honing in on a specific need and being able to target in order to get that outcome. Likewise, Standard Bank in South Africa, they had a goal to, and this was an internal one, to reduce employee IT inquiries. So imagine, and we've all been there, you are working with the customer and you have a need to get your IT support done quickly. So in their case, again, working with their staff and being able to identify some of the most common types of queries, they reduced their reduction of IT support quite substantially and resolved 99% of those queries, a lot more quickly. And of course, our third example, not as good, had to do with IBM. And this really was when they delved into healthcare. So early on in their Watson days, and they kind of jumped into it without a very specific, clear strategy on how they wanted to impact it. So they ended up spending $62 million worth of investment, and the risk, the outcome that was negative, they actually gave bad medical advice at times. And so had to reel that back in, also had some brand damage. So you can see here that sometimes when we go for a very specific business problem resolution, the outcome can be a lot better than trying to do something um, categorical, as it were. Uh, the next one that we're going to take a look at is having a good technology and data strategy. So, yeah, we've got the people lined up. We have a business strategy, and then the next thing we do is start drawing boxes and Visio charts and all sorts of technology architecture drawings. But this is a little bit sensitive because in many cases, we need to be able to know what our capabilities are. And if we don't have a really good understanding and assessment of that, we can make mistakes. Now, two successful answers now to give IBM their due back. Back in the Watson project, yet again, they started looking at internal employee interactions. And these were a lot of the, again, sort of HR, very, very similar to the previous example. And through 11 million employee interactions, they were able to resolve those for common inquiries by 94%. So a lot of this, though, had to do with understanding how they could actually tap in through their existing networks rather than just building something completely different, like we saw with the other example that they had previously. The next group, UBS. Now, this was a legal kind of like the legal chatbot that they had internally. And so legal advice can be very pricey, and it can also be very tricky if you really need to get critical information. And in this case, for the internal employees, because their inquiries were able to be accessed in seconds instead of hours, that really cut two things down substantially. Overall costs that they would pass on. And then the second piece, of course, would be accuracy. So but they really had to line up what they had internally, what databases of knowledge and information, instead of, again, trying to do something quite general. Now, the last example, you can see a pattern here. This one was not so successful, was Tesla. And this had to do with an automated braking infrastructure issue. And because they made one change, but didn't actually understand the impact it had on the braking system, uh, they had a number of complaints. So the issue spiked from just having 34 incidents in 22 months to over 107 in 3. And that ended up being both a brand and a cost issue as they went along. So it's also really critical to know what your infrastructure is capable of before we set out on an AI strategy, because you may have to partner if you don't have that internally. Our next grouping of companies here all reflect how they used expertise and repeatable processes in their AI strategy. So this is the other big challenge I see often with any kind of transformation, but especially when we want to adopt a tool. Sometimes we are trying to solve what we call maybe edge cases or one-offs, where it's that repeatability where we're going to see the return on investment. So company here, Investec, an investment firm, they were able to really impact the upfront of the conversation. And what that was about was reducing what they called interventions in and being able to resolve the first call resolution. And if you're in customer service, you know that when someone's frustrated, if it takes more than one call, that can really impact your ability not just to maintain, but to grow. So not only did that help with that first call resolution, but they saved many sales process hours, about 200 in a year, by being able to better serve their customers. And the second company here, Lequo, they were also using an autonomous, augmented approach. They didn't replace their customer service representatives, but they resolve 30% of those resolutions autonomously. And then the third one here, McDonald's. This one, I think you may remember. This was a partnership that they had for their drive-through, and it was notably rushed. And what we saw, it actually kind of went viral because we started seeing things like orders for ketchup and ice cream, or somebody getting like hundreds of packets of of salt in an order. So this one ended in July of 24 after 3 years and a 100 restaurant rollout. Again, taking the time to understand what are the right processes, not just rushing them in. And I've seen this repeated not just in the AI world, but in many kinds of different organizations as we go. And welcome to the fellow that just joined us here. All right. Now, our next strategy here is really about one that's very passionate for me, all about governance. That sounds really boring, but it's incredibly important. And the way I sum it up is governance is really the process of getting decisions made quickly. And it also encompasses lots of things like processes, controls, our rules, all of those things that help us, as we talked about earlier, guide the project and keep us, especially our people processes, rolling together. Now, in these examples, we had Microsoft. Now, they did a really good job actually with this framework. So I'm using the example that we're going through right now. Part of being able to scale across their own internal organizations, they figured out that they needed to build trust with each other as well as the processes. So a lot of this model that we're seeing today was how they achieved that. And it's a really good example of how you can use models. I always say they need to be adapted, but to help you as you start to build out your new AI processes and maybe new products and services. Deloitte also has managed a lot of what they call their switching costs. So these are a lot of when you're changing the way that you deliver business or the way that you do things, there's cost to that. So AI helped them to really start moving away from, say, being a SaaS type sales transactional model to more of a business process operator, more in that way. And through that, they were able to integrate AI in their learning and development, which helped to accelerate that change. And of course, our last, not least, final example here, when we look at perhaps AI governance and a loss, is Amazon. And Amazon really, like we see in the pattern here, ran too quickly. And they tried really, really hard to outsource a lot of their HR. And within that, they actually ended up creating a lot of reputational damage. They tried to hire using AI, and it became quite biased. They ended up not achieving what they had set out to do. So again, when we look at all five of examples, it really is taking the time and thinking through each step carefully. That helps us to get the strategy right for our organization, whether you're one individual, a solopreneur, or whether you're running a very significant operation. So here are a few things for you to self-rate based on what we've just gone through. And in each category, give yourself a rating out of 1 out of 10. Okay. So let's look first at business strategy. Thinking through, do you have clear AI objectives? Are they tied to outcomes? And are your investments aligned with your strategy or your priorities? So give yourself a scale rating there. Uh, on tech and data. So looking at how you use technology today. First of all, can you access clean, structured data? Do you have of that? Do you know if you have any governance or decision frameworks that are preventing risks? Or are they, hampering you? So again, just think through some of those. Give yourself a 1 out of 10. Now, for your AI strategy and experience drivers, do you have repeatable processes that you could automate or that you could be very easy to do? And do you know where AI does well versus where humans are needed? And in many cases where things kind of go off the rails, it's generally where that tension exists. Uh, on organization and culture, this one's again very, very critical. Do we have leadership committed within the organization? And are they also ready to train and work alongside the employees as we move it forward? Because without that, that's going to be very hard to move everything else. And finally, around AI governance, do you have controls available, rules, policies? And are you managing these risks proactively or are you doing it kind of as they come up? So those are the five. And, give yourself a rough score out of 50. And here's kind of how you can interpret that. So let's say you're at 40 to 50. Hey, you're in that top 5%. And perhaps, you might have a few things to share with us. If you're within 30 to 39, you have a strong foundation and probably at the point where you're ready to scale some successful pilots. If you're within the 20 to 29 range, this might require some catch up, and we would address perhaps the weakest drivers first. Probably look at our organization, maybe look at our tech capacity, some of those things. And between 10 and 19, you're at risk. And I would start with culture and governance to avoid, the McDonald's fate, as it were. All right, so here's a plan for 2025. So if you're in the 10 to 29 average, perhaps week one, take a look at your shadow AI. See what that looks like, and maybe think about a basic governance. How do you want people to show up and use those tools in your workplace? For the first month, let's look at some high impact use cases, just like that standard bank's IT help desk. Maybe you don't have a help desk, but maybe there's something that you can do that can take that efficient work away. Then in the second month, building that data foundation and the security to help move that forward would be ideal. And then followed up in month three with a pilot with some clear metrics for success. Very, very focused. And if you are in the 30 to 50 range, then here's what you might want to start doing. Maybe in quarter one, and of course, quarter one starting in your quarter, strengthen your weakest driver and perhaps find some of those examples. So let's say, for example, it's governance. How do you build successful ways to get decisions made? Then in the second quarter, scale those use cases, ones that are proven. Then we have to get into making some good strategic vendor decisions about how you're going to partner and who will help you to get to the goals that you've set. And then we want to measure that return on investment and plan maybe some enterprise expansion, especially if it's going really, really well. So, my friends, that is what I have today to share with you. And we do have a few moments for some questions here. If anybody would like to pop up and ask, we've probably got about 5 minutes because I got started a little bit slower. And I'll also be sharing this recording. So, for those of you that were here as well. And feel free to put it in the chat if there's, it's great. Okay. Well, I know. Oh, excellent. Well, thank you for joining, Darren. Thank you, everybody. And stay tuned. We'll be doing more of these little half-hour insights, working with LinkedIn to get the streaming going properly. And in the meantime, feel free to reach out if you or your organization would like to delve more into today's topic. So have a great rest of the day, everybody.